Hi everyone, I'm just here to share some of the pieces of the celebration that I do every year on Good Friday for people who aren't able to make it but would still like to be part of it in some way. I love Easter. I love celebrating every aspect of Easter, across cultural traditions, etc. But my Good Friday one is celebration is usually geared more towards children, so I'm going to read the little spiel that I read out at the beginning of it, tying in some of the nature traditions with the Christian traditions, and then I'm going to read the story that I've written for this year's Good Friday, the story of the Hot Cross Buns, which is tailored for children, but sort of touches on some of the deep symbology of the cross. Every year I write a different story. It's become a bit of a tradition. So this year I'm focusing on the symbol of the cross. So first up, the spiel. The word Easter comes from the name of a Saxon goddess known as Oestre or Istre, the goddess of the dawn and the spring. Her name comes from a word meaning dawn or the shining light from the east. Bringing in the new day and the end of the darkness in winter, Oestre was associated with new life and fertility. The rabbit was her sacred animal, known for its ability to reproduce abundantly. In ancient times, spring festivals celebrating Oestre and Ishtar featured coloured eggs as a symbol of fertility, newborn chicks representing new growth, and bunnies expressing gratitude for abundance. Approximately 2,000 years ago, a man named Jesus, Yeshua of Nazareth, lived an extraordinary life in the land of Israel. Those who followed him knew him as the Christ, the Son of God, the Saviour of the world. At the end of his mortal life, at just 33 years of age, he was taken, tried, and crucified by leaders of his own people. He was then placed in a sealed tomb by his devoted friends and followers. The egg is also a symbol of the closed tomb containing the golden sun. On the third day after his entombment, 2 women came to anoint his body, but found his body nowhere within. Soon after, one of the women, his beloved Mary, saw him as a resurrected being. He then appeared to some of his other followers. This triumph over death and the promise that life is eternal is celebrated the world over at a time which coincides with the celebration of the vernal equinox, or the beginning of spring in the northern hemisphere. Both traditions merge into a celebration of life, renewal, and the divine power of healing, overcoming darkness and death for all. Okay, and the story of the Hot Cross Buns. I just did this a couple of days ago, so it's not perfect, the illustrations. Story of the Hot Cross Buns. Every year on the day called Good Friday, my mum takes little buns with crosses on them. Bakes little buns with crosses on them. She calls them Hot Cross Buns. They're really yummy, especially with lots of butter all melty and runny, and I can't wait to eat them for breakfast that morning. Last year, though, when we were sitting together at the table enjoying our special bun breakfast, I asked Mummy, why are the little buns so angry? She replied, surprised, whatever do you mean, my dear? There they are, sitting at the table with their hot cross buns. I said, well, you call them hot cross buns. I know they're hot because we eat them warm out of the oven, but why are they cross? Mummy laughed. It's not an angry kind of cross, Pumpkin. The cross represents the cross upon which the great man Jesus Christ died a long time ago. He died? I stared at her. On a cross? I didn't understand. But who put him on there? Some angry people, she said, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. People who didn't like what he was teaching. I was still confused and feeling a bit sad. What was he teaching people, Mummy? Was he teaching them to do bad things? No, she replied quietly. He was trying to teach people to love one another. I was shocked. So the cross was an angry cross then, I insisted. If Jesus was kind and the people who put him on there were angry and made him die. I didn't like this story, and I pushed my plate away with my half-eaten bun on it. Mummy took a deep breath then and looked me right in the eyes. I'm going to teach you something very special, she said, something that not many people understand. I looked back at her eagerly, glad she was going to explain. My mum always had a good explanation for everything. She picked up 2 butter knives that were lying on the table, held them together in one hand, pointing up towards the ceiling. Long, long ago, as far back as anyone can remember, the cross was a perfect symbol of everything that is good and whole. It was a sign of peace, unity, abundance, and prosperity. What do those words mean, Mummy? I interrupted. Well, she continued, unity is when you have people on one side, she held up one butter knife, and people on the other, she held up the other butter knife, and they come together in agreement, finding a middle ground where they can all get along and work and live together in peace and harmony. She brought the 2 knives together so that they made a cross in the air. The cross was the sign of all things coming together in balance. And when things are in balance, everyone is happy, have what they need to enjoy life. Not too little, not too much, but just enough. Just right, like Goldilocks, I exclaimed to show that I understood. Yes, she smiled at me. Just right, like Goldilocks. So for a long time, people used the sign of the cross to symbolize when things were peaceful and good. Sometimes they would draw it a little differently, with little feet on the end of the forearms, for example, so they looked like it was spinning like a windmill. Mummy placed the still cross knives on the table and added invisible marks at their ends with her fingertips to demonstrate. Believe it or not, this symbol has actually been around for about 12,000 years. Or sometimes they would draw a little circle like a ring of light around the upward pointing arm of the cross, which was an extra special sign used by the ancient Egyptians, and in places like the islands of Britain, it's a Celtic symbol there, and in many old cultures around the world. But over time, I mean thousands of years, the meaning of the cross started to change. People forgot its beauty and perfection and started to use the symbol to mean things that weren't good at all. Can you think of an example of that? She asked me. I thought hard. Well, pirates put crosses on their flags. Mummy pulled a face. Indeed, and people would be frightened by that, wouldn't they? I nodded. And at school, when I get something wrong, my teacher puts a big red cross next to my work. Yes. I frowned. I didn't like it when that happened. Yes, that's no fun either, Mummy agreed. Anything else? I tried to think of all the places where I'd seen a cross. There are lots of crosses on signs, like when you're not allowed to do something. They put a big cross with a picture of the thing you're not allowed to do. You're right, said Mummy. The crosses come to mean something is wrong instead of meaning things are perfectly right. And like you said before, when we say that someone is cross, we usually mean that they are angry rather than that they are being peaceful and harmonious. Well then, I looked at her in grave concern. Why are we eating buns with crosses on them if it means something bad now, or someone is angry, or someone might die? I don't want to eat buns that make people sad. I crossed my arms, hoping that there was more to my mum's explanation. She smiled again and picked up one of the buns on the plate in the middle of the table. We celebrate with the cross, my darling, because the true meaning of the cross is something good. When we look at these buns, something deep within us feels and knows that the cross represents goodness, kindness, peace, and love, even if many people in the world have forgotten that that is what it is really about. Even Jesus Christ, when he was taken by angry men 2,000 years ago, wasn't afraid of the cross they made for him. Despite the fact that most people didn't understand his message back then, he knew that in the end, love will always conquer evil, and everything that is wrong in the world will someday be made right again. He knew that ultimately the sign of the cross is a sign that promises great healing for all. Like the Red Cross, I cried, on the hospitals and the ambulances. Mummy gave me a huge grin then. Yes, my clever child, you're right. People haven't completely forgotten then, have they? And you know, the man Jesus also told people that he was the bread of life, that they should eat bread in order to remember him and his message of love. So maybe, just maybe, it might be okay for you to finish eating your hot cross bun after all. for breakfast this morning after all. What do you think? I nodded, gave her a thumbs up, and pulled my plate back towards me. Suddenly, I felt hungry enough to eat all of the hot cross buns in the world. There's Jesus offering a hot cross bun. And that's the end of the story. So that's my message for Good Friday, and I hope you all enjoyed that.